What's going on, everyone? My name is Jasmine. On today's episode of The Slain Project, we're going to be talking about 36-year-old Cindy Gladue. In 2011, she was murdered in an Edmonton hotel room by a man named Bradley Barton. At his trial, her preserved private part was put on display, and the prosecutors who did this were later promoted to judges. And this case is one of the reasons why it is so important to talk about solved cases, because we could see how the victim was treated from the beginning to the end. Don't forget to check out my other videos, and if you want to see more videos on missing and murdered Indigenous people, click that subscribe button and the notification bell. Now let's get right into it. Cindy Gladue was born on July 23, 1974 in Athabasca, Alberta. She was the oldest child in her family and was of Cree and Métis heritage. Her family lived in Cold Lake, Alberta before finally settling in Edmonton. Cindy was excited for this move because it would bring her closer to her grandma. Cindy was 16 when her grandma passed away, and it broke her heart. Cindy was a happy, cheerful, and caring person. Her Facebook profile is full of good mornings and positive vibes. She would go on to have 3 daughters of her own. Her mother, Donna McLeod, has stated that when Cindy was old enough to move out on her own, she rented an apartment downstairs from her apartment. Cindy was very close to her mom and would always make sure she cooked breakfast for her because Donna was notorious for skipping the first meal of the day. In fact, Cindy loved cooking. Her daughters fondly remember watching cooking shows with her when they were little. Cindy loved her children very much and would do anything for them. But at some point, according to her mom, she fell in with the wrong crowd. Cindy eventually grew dependent on alcohol and crack cocaine. Donna stepped in and started taking care of her daughters when times got hard for Cindy. The family still were very close after this happened. They all loved each other, and Cindy's addictions did not spoil this. When Cindy was 36 years old, she was dating a man who was also battling alcohol and drug addictions. On June 20th, 2011, he rode his bicycle to Lucky's Lounge, which was located next to the Yellowhead Inn at 14950 Yellowhead Trail Road in North Edmonton. This hotel has since been renamed to the Ramada. He went to this location to snipe, which is looking for used cigarette butts. People do this when they cannot afford to buy a pack of cigarettes. While outside the lounge, she began talking to a man named Bradley Barton. Bradley was a long-haul trucker from Ontario, and he was employed as a professional mover. He was in town for a moving job that took him from Soda Springs, Idaho, to Edmonton. The job was delayed for a couple days due to customs and access to a driveway where the belongings were to be moved to. The Yellowhead Inn was a popular spot for truckers. It has a restaurant, lounge, gas station, and a liquor and beer store in close proximity. This makes me inclined to think that a lot of activity goes on at the hotel. Bradley had asked Cindy's boyfriend if he had any lady friends. He was looking for a date that night. The boyfriend later brought Cindy and she met with Bradley. I do not know how often Cindy participated in this type of activity, or if she did it willingly or was forced to by her boyfriend. Her mother has stated that she did not know that Cindy did stuff like this. Edmonton police have also said that they had one previous encounter with Cindy for a prostitution charge. Bradley Barton is a large man. He towered over Cindy, who was 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed about 110 pounds. He also had a dark fetish, something that should place him in the category of being a sexual sadist. He liked to search for vaginas being ripped and torn by large objects on the internet. The following account is his version of events. Cindy is not here to contest his statements. His first night with Cindy, he said that he used 4 of his large fingers on her and they had intercourse. He said everything was fine and he paid her $60 and she went on her way. Bradley called her the next day and she met him and one of his co-workers at the lounge next to the Yellowhead Inn. Bradley lied to the co-worker and said that Cindy was a furniture packer for a moving company in the Edmonton area. He did not want to admit that he hired her for his own pleasure. At the bar, the trio had drinks until closing time. The co-worker and bartender stated that Cindy did not seem overly drunk. This is only their opinions, but keep in mind that Bradley's co-worker could have tried to make it seem like Bradley did not take advantage of Cindy. The bartender also may not have wanted to get in trouble for over-serving her. But the numbers do not lie, and it was determined that Cindy was 4 times over the legal limit with a blood alcohol reading of 0.34. Alcohol levels this high can lead to alcohol poisoning and even death. Bradley had room number 139 at the hotel. When he and Cindy were walking back to the room, he asked his co-worker if he wanted in on Cindy. The man declined, and Bradley said to him, "What happens on the road stays on the road." They were last seen on camera at 12:42 a.m. before they entered his room. Bradley said that the same series of events went down as the previous night, but he used all 5 fingers on her. A lamp was on in the room, and when he looked at his hand, he noticed blood. He said that he thought she was menstruating and that he was not going to pay her. He then claims that Cindy went to wash up in the restroom and he went to sleep. He then awoke the next morning and found her naked, lifeless body in the tub. Bradley Barton seemed unbothered by what had just happened to Cindy. He wiped some blood off the bathroom floor because it got on his feet. He then brushed his teeth and got ready for his workday. He proceeded to check out of his hotel room at about 7:40 a.m. and grabbed a cup of coffee. He then jumped into his moving truck and told another co-worker of his that an unknown lady had knocked on his door the night before and asked him to use the shower. He then said he went to sleep and found her body when he woke up. The co-worker was startled and told him to call the police. Bradley went back in and told the hotel staff that he had forgotten some papers in his room and they gave him the key to enter. This is when Bradley called the police. A maintenance worker at the hotel would later say that they went inside the room to see what was happening because the front desk told him a 911 call was placed from that room. He said that Bradley didn't seem bothered by Cindy's dead body and calmly pointed at the bathroom and said, "Look in there." His lies continued immediately upon calling police. He calmly told the dispatcher that a woman was dead in the bathtub and she was covered in blood. He said they were partying the night before and she wanted to take a shower and he went to sleep. He explained that he tried to poke her to wake her up and that she was dead. He was adamant that he did not harm her. The police arrived and began examining the scene at 8:08 a.m., about 5 minutes after being dispatched. There was a noticeable blood stain in the middle of the bed and a bloody bedspread was lying on the floor. Cindy's shoes were also observed lying on the floor under a desk where the lamp was. There was a bag of clothes under the bathroom sink that Constable Dean Ducart said appeared to be women's clothing. There was a lot of blood spatter throughout the whole bathroom. Bradley was taken into custody and his story would continue to change in the following days. He told an undercover officer that he let some unknown people sleep in his room while he went to sleep in the sleeper cab of his truck and that they must have harmed Cindy. In a taped interview with police on June 24, 2011, he said Cindy knocked on his door and offered to sell herself, but he declined. The police had videotape evidence of Bradley and Cindy together, so they knew that he was not being truthful in his statements. They also noticed that there were not any blood drops on the floor leading from the bed to the bathroom, so it was theorized that Bradley had picked her up off the bed and placed her in the bathtub. The autopsy report noted dried blood down Cindy's legs and small scrapes and bruises on her arms and legs. I could not find any detailed report on the bruises, but I wonder if they could have been from his fingertips while holding her down. The most notable injury and cause of her death was an 11-centimeter cut on her right vaginal lip that went through to the vaginal wall. This cut is the equivalent of about 4.33 inches, and it was large enough to extend the entire length of her outer vaginal lip. Investigators were convinced that he had used some sort of object or weapon and intended to kill Cindy or cause bodily harm to her by using extreme penetrating force. Because the Crown believed a weapon was used and her death appeared to be the result of a sexual assault, the case went to trial for first-degree murder and manslaughter in 2015. Racial stereotyping and inhumanity was on full display. In opening statements, Crown prosecution said Cindy was a sex worker who had a working relationship with Bradley Barton. It was argued by the Crown that Cindy could not consent to sexual activity because of her blood alcohol level. The defense argued that Cindy had consensual rough sex and died. They also said that there was no murder weapon found, so there could be no murder charge. They also said that after her encounter with Bradley on the bed, she walked to the bathroom herself and died in the bathtub. Bradley stated that he lied about hiring Cindy for sex because he was initially in shock. He admitted to lying to everyone about how he knew Cindy and what happened before she died. He did not want to lose his job or family. He also stated that the morning he found Cindy, he just wanted to get out of there and start his day. By both sides of the court, Cindy was repeatedly referred to as a native woman and a prostitute. The more respectful terms like woman, mother, or daughter were not used. Bradley's internet searches for violent vaginal injuries were not allowed as evidence, and Cindy's sexual history was presented without going through the proper proceedings for permission to do so. But the most horrifying thing was yet to come. The Crown prosecution wanted to show the extent of Cindy's injuries to the court. So instead of using pictures with expert testimony, they had the chief medical examiner remove and preserve her pelvic area from her body before she was cremated. The prosecution wanted the jury to determine if the 11-centimeter gash on her genital was a cut or a tear. Her most intimate body part was put on display for everyone to see on a large screen in the courtroom. Forensic pathologist and chief medical examiner Graham Dowling, who performed her autopsy, rolled up his sleeves and slapped on a pair of latex gloves to demonstrate what he thought happened to Cindy. He believed that her wound was caused by a sharp object, even though there was good indication that the wound was actually a tear, which was suggested by another forensic pathologist named Janice Ophoven. Dowling defended his demonstration by later saying that the autopsy pictures would not be good enough for the jury to determine the cause of the wound. A prosecutor named Carol Godfrey also defended this horrific act by saying Cindy's remains could be shown in good taste, almost like biology class. Cindy's family did not know this was going to happen and had to endure this dehumanizing and barbaric display in the courtroom. No court official at any time before this thought it was a bad idea or attempted to stop this. During my research, I have never read if the family was ever offered any counseling after witnessing this. This was the first time in Canada that preserved human remains have been shown in court. This reduced Cindy's life to a specimen used as physical evidence. At the conclusion of the trial, the judge gave his instructions to the jury. He told the jury not to let Bradley's lies after Cindy's death influence their decision. He also asked them to consider if he had a motive. He repeatedly referred to her as a native prostitute, and his wording implied that she consented to the force of Bradley's large hands. The judge then told the jurors they could convict Bradley on the murder or manslaughter charges or acquit him. An all-white and mostly male jury delivered the verdict as not guilty. This infuriated a lot of people, and thousands protested across Canada. The Crown immediately appealed because of the jury instructions. In June 2017, the Alberta Court of Appeals overturned Bradley Barton's acquittal and ordered a new trial. This was based on the fact that the original judge had violated rape shield laws that protect the privacy of sexual assault victims. Cindy's sexual history, including her first night with Bradley, should not have been admitted into the first trial without going through the proper channels. The Supreme Court would also back up this ruling, and a second trial began in early 2021 and followed proper court procedures. However, Bradley could only be tried for manslaughter. The Crown prosecution had initially believed a weapon or some sort of object was used on Cindy. They scrapped this idea and believed the injury was from his hands, so the murder charge was dropped. The second trial was basically the same as the first one, but more respectful language was used to describe Cindy. The defense also introduced the now infamous photo of Cindy smoking a cigarette. Many believe this unfavorable photo was displayed to show that she was indigenous and to implant racial stereotypes into the minds of the jurors. Cindy's preserved body part was excluded from being displayed, but photographs of her wound was shown. Her family was alerted before this happened, so they could excuse themselves from the courtroom until the photo was taken down. A trace of Bradley's hand was done, and this photo provided by APTN shows it compared to the normal size of a woman's hand. This trace outline shows that his knuckles were 11 centimeters across, the same size as Cindy's fatal wound. It was also brought up that Cindy may have survived her attack if she received medical care within 20 to 30 minutes of the injury. There were also bloody footprints and handprints on the wall next to the bathtub that indicated Cindy was alive when dumped in the tub. This indicated that Bradley deliberately failed to get her the help she needed to stop the bleeding, and that she was either too injured or too intoxicated to get the help herself. At closing arguments, Bradley's defense team said that Cindy was enjoying the sexual encounter. They continued to press the belief that she consented to the harm that was done to her when Bradley acted out his sick fantasies on her. Even though Cindy was hired by Bradley to perform sexual acts with him, she did not consent to the severe bodily harm that was done to her. Bradley Barton was found guilty of the manslaughter charge in February 2021. The prosecution requested he be sentenced to 18 to 20 years, and the defense team requested 8 to 10 years. He eventually received a sentence of 12.5 years. Bradley received credit for a year of time served because he was in custody for the pretrial and court proceedings because he could not afford the continuous travel from Ontario to Edmonton. He was 55 years old when he was sentenced and will probably be released around the year 2030 at age 66. This is assuming that he serves his whole sentence. He attempted to appeal this outcome on grounds of exclusion of evidence and a question of consent. His appeal was denied in January 2024. But there were two final insults done to Cindy. At the conclusion of the second trial, her family requested her preserved body part so that the rest of her could be laid to rest with her cremated remains. The Crown had informed them that the medical examiner's office was in charge of her remains. There was a meeting with her family, and they were informed that her remains had been lost after the first trial, and there has not been any other contact with her family since they were told this. Two Crown prosecutors from the first trial, the ones who thought it was a good idea to remove and present her body part in court, were promoted to provincial court judges at the Alberta Court of Justice. Carrie Ann Downey was appointed in 2020, and Carol Godfrey was appointed in 2023. They both called Cindy a hooker and prostitute at the first trial. And although justice was served, it was not nearly enough compared to the torture and treatment Cindy and her family had to endure. After the conviction, her mother Donna stated that she had never dreamt of Cindy since she passed. Hopefully Cindy has or will visit her mother soon in her dreams. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you knew Cindy or were in Edmonton around the time this happened, please share your memories down below, and I will see you in my next video.